දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, on average, the Government Medical Officers Association believes that around 100 COVID-19 patients could have left the Western Province. Lockdown changes. Freedom for some areas in Colombo while immediate isolation for others. COVID burial saga. 2 locations with deep water table communicated to the Prime Minister by the Minister of Water Supply. Open armed welcome. First tourist flight to Sri Lanka in the new normal set to land in the island tomorrow.
The flight from Caribbean Airlines will be landing in Makala with 185 passengers.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Sunday the 27th of December 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
Nava Sunlight Sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamik Ekanai. Let's start with your local stories by taking a look at the pandemic situation. Now, the Government Medical Officers Association cautions that measures the country puts in place now will determine whether the plans made for next year could be executed or not. Schools are due to reopen with examinations also planned to be worked off next year. There are also plans to attract more tourist arrivals to the island. With that being the case, the GMOA also warns that on average around 100 COVID-19 infected persons may have left the Western Province undetected, since 0.4% to 0.5% of people leaving the Western Province tested positive during random rapid antigen tests.
Sri Lanka confirmed a total of 598 new coronavirus infections yesterday, with the Colombo district accounting the higher number of infections with 235. The area of Isabella reported 150 of the infections from the Colombo district. Out of yesterday's infections, 164 cases were confirmed from the Gampar district, 84 from Kaluthara, 25 from Batiklo, 22 from Gaul, 20 from Ampara, with Ratnapura accounting for 17. 26 more cases were confirmed from 9 other districts. 5 Sri Lankan overseas returnees were also among yesterday's case tally.
කොළඹින් සහ බස්නාහිර පළාතෙන් පිට වෙන මායිම් වල තැන් 11ක වගේ අපි මේ රැපිඩ් ඇන්ටිජන් ටෙස්ට් එක සිද්ධ කළා. 10000කට ආසන්න පරීක්ෂණ ප්‍රමාණයක් සිදු කළාට පස්සේ අපිට රෝගීන් 41 දෙනෙක් ඊයේ වෙනකොට හඳුනගෙන තියෙනවා. එතකොට මේකෙන් දල වශයෙන් එතකොට ප්‍රතිශතය ගත්තාම 0.4%.5ක් වගේ ප්‍රතිශතයක් පොසිටිව් වෙලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට දෛනිකව කොච්චර ප්‍රමාණයක් සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයන් යටතේ බස්නාහිර පළාතෙන් පිටට යනවාද කිව්වහම ඉලක්කම් විදිහට විවිධ අගයන් එනවා. දල වශයෙන් 20000කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් පොදු ප්‍රවාහනය සහ පෞද්ගලික ප්‍රවාහන මාධ්‍ය දුම්රිය ඒ වගේව පාවිච්චි කරලා කොළඹින් බැහැරට එහෙම නැත්නම් බස්නාහිර පළාතෙන් බැහැරට ගමන් කරනවා කියන එක තමයි මේ වෙනකොට ඔප්පු වෙලා තියෙන සාධකත්වයක් එන්නේ. ඒතකොට 1000කට 5 දෙනෙක් එනවා නම් ඒක 10000කට 50ක් වෙනවා. 20000කට 100ක් වගේ ප්‍රමාණයක් දෛනිකව අනිත් අයට කොවිඩ් බෝ කරන්න පුළුවන් මට්ටමේ ඉන්න ආසාදිතයන් 100ක් වගේ ප්‍රමාණයක් බස්නාහිරින් පිට වෙලා ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. මේ 500 දෙනාම යම් අවදානමක් තියෙනවා ඒ තමන් ගිය පළාත්වල රෝගේ ව්‍යාප්ත කරන්න. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන් මෙන්න මේ කියන තත්ත්වය අපි කොතරම් සාර්ථක ලෙස අපි ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවද කියන එක ප්‍රකාශයටපත් වෙන්නේ ජනවාරි මැද විතර වෙනකොට. ඒතකොට ජනවාරි 11 පාසල් විවෘත කිරීමට නියමිතයි. මාර්තු මාසයේ අපිට විභාග පවත්වන්න නියමිතයි. ජනවාරි මාසයේ ඇතුළත ගුවන් තොටුපළ විවෘත කළ සංචාරක කර්මාන්තය ආරම්භ කිරීමට නියමිතයි. මේ සියල්ලම ඒතකොට තීරණය වෙන්නේ මේ මොහොතේදී අපි ගත්ත ක්‍රියාමාර්ගවල ප්‍රතිඵල ජනවාරි මැද වෙනකොට නිකුත් වෙනකොට.
In the meantime, Sri Lanka's COVID-19 death toll rose by 1 yesterday for the second consecutive day, placing the overall figure at 187. According to the Department of Government Information, the victim was a 67-year-old man who had been a resident at an elder's home in the area of Modara in Colombo. The cause of his death was reported as COVID pneumonia. In other developments, a 22-year-old from Markola North had fled his home after testing positive for the virus. The individual, however, was apprehended by the Sapugaskanda police when he was reportedly hiding in a house in the area of Makola North. A woman had also been with him at the residence, with her parents residing on the floor above them. Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana said that health authorities are taking necessary measures to quarantine all the residents of the house.
විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔක්තෝබර් 4 වෙනිදා සිට මේ දක්වා කාලය තුල මේ ආකාරයට පැන ගිය පුද්ගලයන් 8 දෙනෙක් සම්බන්ධව වාර්තා වුණා. කෙසේ වෙතත් මේ පැන යාමට උත්සාහ කළ ඒ වගේම පැන ගිය සියලුම අය මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය සම්බන්ධ වැරදි වලට අදාළව අත්අඩංගුවට ගෙන සිටි ඒ වගේම ඒ සම්බන්ධව විවිධ අවස්ථාවලදී අත්අඩංගුවට ගෙන මුදා හැර සිටි පුද්ගලයන් වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය වලට ඇබ්බැහි වූවන් මේ ආකාරයට නිරෝධායන රීතීන් අනුගමනය නොකරමින් කටයුතු කරන ස්වභාවයක් දක්නට ලැබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒ අය සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඒ අයගේ ඥාතීන් දෙමව්පියන් මේ ගැන වැඩි අවධානයක් යොමු කළ යුතුයි. ඔවුන් යම්කිසි අවස්ථාවක නිවෙසක නිරෝධායනයට ලක් කළහොත් ඒ සෑම අවස්ථාවකදීම ඒ පිළිබඳව වැඩි අවධානයක් යොමු කර කටයුතු කරන ලෙසට අපි කාරුණිකව ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
Meanwhile, with 650 persons successfully recovering and being discharged from hospitals, the country's overall coronavirus recoveries rose to 32,701. There, however, were 462 fresh cases today, with 408 being close contacts of earlier patients, while the other 54 being prison inmates. With that, the number of active COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka went up to 7,954. There are also 497 persons under observation.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නීරෝගිමත් දිවයකට ලංකාවේ පළමු වරට හඳුන්වා දෙන මැලිබන් වෙජි ක්‍රැකර්
Crunchy veggie.
Some areas in Colombo which were under isolation for some time will taste freedom from 5 a.m. tomorrow. The police areas of Maradana and Dam Street are among the areas to be brought out of isolation. However, the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 also locked down some areas in Colombo and Ratnapura districts until further notice. Now let's take a look at the changes made to isolated areas.
Owing to the rapid increase in the infections of COVID-19, steps have been taken by the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 to isolate several Grama Niladhara divisions that come under the jurisdiction of the Divisional Secretariat divisions of Aheliyagoda and Godakavela in the Ratnapura district with immediate effect. Accordingly, the Grama Niladhara divisions of Minnana, Vilegoda, Yakudagoda, Asgangula and Bopatta within the Aheliyagoda Divisional Secretariat division were brought under isolation this afternoon. The Grama Niladhara divisions of Rakwana Township, Rakwana North, Rakwana South, Massimula and Kottala, which falls under the jurisdiction of Godakavela Divisional Secretariat division, were also isolated with immediate effect. In another development, the Veluvana road in Dematagoda was also isolated since last midnight. In the meantime, a decision has been made to bring several areas in the Colombo district out of isolation from tomorrow morning. Accordingly, the police areas of Dam Street and Maradana will be completely brought out of isolation at 5 a.m. The entire Kesalvatta area will too be brought out of isolation at 5 a.m. tomorrow, except for its Grama Niladhara divisions of Halfsdorp West and Halfsdorp East. Further, the Grama Niladhara divisions of Vakanda and Hunupitiya belonging to the police areas of Slave Island, Grama Niladhara divisions of Halgahavatta and Kalipulavatta, which come under the jurisdiction of the Borala police area, will also be brought out of their current status of isolation. What's more, the Mayura place falling within the Vellavatta police area too will enjoy freedom of movement from tomorrow at 5 a.m.
In the meantime, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has advised to reopen cinemas in strict compliance with COVID-19 safety guidelines. The Prime Minister's office points out that the film industry has been vulnerable due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as both production and consumption of its output has stopped completely. Following careful elaboration with artists, including film producers, directors and members of Film Association, Minister of Buddha Sasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs, Prime Minister Rajapaksa has permitted the reopening of cinemas under strict new health protocols. The decision has been taken as a measure to revive the entertainment industry. However, cinemas in isolated areas will remain closed. The PM stressed the importance of enforcing strict sanitisation rules within the cinema premises and requests the public to strictly adhere to the COVID-19 guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health and safely return to the new normal. Now, all preparations are set by the airport authorities to welcome the first batch of tourists to the island tomorrow. The flight carrying passengers from Ukraine is scheduled to land at the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport. Director of Airport and Aviation Services, Lanka Private Limited, Shehan Sumanasekara told us that Sri Lanka plans on opening its borders completely depending on the success of this project.
Officially, we are having our first tourist flight tomorrow at 2:40 p.m. scheduled at Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport. The flight from Kayap Airlines Boeing 737-900 type will be landing in Mattala with 185 passengers. As of now, the pax load that we have confirmed with the airline. Sri Lanka planning to open its borders very soon after this trial project that Sri Lanka is conducting. And once it's a success, we would be very eager and hoping to welcome many other tourists who are intending to come to Sri Lanka. Also, what's important to note is that we have another flight at 12:15 p.m. again on the 29th. Ukrainian International Airlines would come again to Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport, bringing in almost a similar number of passenger tourists who will come again to Sri Lanka. So what's important to note is all these tourists are coming in on a travel bubble concept. So it's pre-planned and a very secure concept. There'll be many more tourists soon after these two flights. There are many more scheduled flights coming in up until 19th of January. And all these flights are scheduled at Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport.
Now, Minister of Water Supply Vasudeva Nanakara says that a report highlighting 2 locations with a deep underground water table was forwarded to Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. He notes that the relevant report could be considered in making a decision on whether burials would be permitted in disposing the remains of the victims of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health today urged people to steer clear of spreading fake news on the topic.
The Ministry of Health today urged people to refrain from posting fake news on the disposal method of COVID-19 deceased. In a statement, it pointed out that some politicians and websites are spreading false information pertaining to the burial and cremation of victims who succumbed to COVID-19. The minister stated that in line with all the specialist reports received by it, the remains of the COVID-19 deceased will only be cremated. It urged people not to distort health policies with political agendas proliferating fake news. In the meantime, Minister of Water Supply Vasudeva Nanayakara says that a report on 2 locations having deep water tables was submitted to Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and Minister of Health Pavitra Vanniyarachchi.
අගමැතිතුමත් එක්කලා තිබුණා සාකච්ඡාවක් මුස්ලිම් මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ගේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේකට මම ගියා. මට බාර කළා එක දෙයක්. භූගත ජලය ළඟ මට්ටමක නැති ප්‍රදේශ තියෙනවාද කියලා බලන්න. ඒ අනුව මම අපේ භූවිද්‍යාඥ මහතාට කිව්වා භූගත ජලය ළඟ මට්ටමක නැති ඉතා ගැඹුරෙහි තියෙන ටැංක් තියෙනවාද මොනවද? එතකොට එතුමා මට තැන් දෙකක් පෙන්නුවා. එතුමාගේ වාර්තාවකින් භූගත ජලය අඩි 30ක් කෑරුවත් නැහැ. ඒ වගේ මොන කාලයකවත් කියලා එතුමා මට වාර්තා කළා. එකක් මන්නාරමේ මරිච්චිකට්ටු කියන තැන. එකක් නැගෙනහිර පළාතේ එරගම කියන ස්ථානය. වාර්තාව අගමැතිතුමාට දුන්නා, සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යතුමියට දුන්නා. ඒක සලකා බලන්න පුළුවන් අපේ වෛද්‍යවරුන්ට ඔවුන්ගේ කමිටුව නැවත රැස් වුණා.
In the meantime, experts say that cremation of COVID-19 victims continue to be the best form of disposing the remains of COVID-19 dead.
මේ වෛරස තත්වයක් නිසා වඩාම නිර්වද්‍ය ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය ඒ මලසිරුරින් සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම වෛරසය ඉවත් වීම සහ ඒ මලසිරුරෙන් තවත් පුද්ගලයෙකුට වෛරසය නිකුත් වීම වැළැක්වීම. ඒ සඳහා තියෙන හොඳම ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය නිරපේක්ෂ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය ආදානය කිරීම. ඊට එහා ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගැන සලකා බැලිය හැකි විවිධ අවස්ථාවල නමුත් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් නිශ්චිත සහතිකයක් කිසිම රටකින් එහෙම ලැබිලා නැහැ. ලංකාවේ වෙන මියගේ පුද්ගලයන්ගේ මලසිරුරු ශීතකරණ තුල දවාගෙන තිබූ කාලයන් තුල සිදු කරන ලද PCR පරීක්ෂණ පවා නැවත වෛරසය පවතින බවට සනාථ වුණා.
එතකොට ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ මේවා පසට එකතු වුනහම ජලයට එකතු වුනහම මේවා කොච්චර කාලයක් තියෙයි? ඇත්තම කියනවා නම් මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට උත්තරයක් තාම ලෝකෙ හොයාගෙන නැහැ. අපිට 100% විශ්වාසයි මේ මලසිරුරු ආදාහනය කරොත් මේ වෛරසය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම විනාශ වෙනවා. ඒක ලෝකේ තහවුරු කරලා තියෙනවා. අනතුරක් කිසිසේත්ම නැහැ කියන තීරණයට යන එක තමයි මේ වෙලාවේ කළ යුත්තේ.
We will see you shortly after this break. Stay with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa met the farming community in Anuradhapura and inspected the damage caused by the fall armyworm to their maize cultivations. During the audience, the farmers also conveyed their grievances related to the human-elephant conflict in the region.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa visited the area of Pahalagama in Alepattu in Anuradhapura yesterday and inspected the damage caused to crops by the fall armyworm invasion. Farmers have been fleeing the ill effects of the fall armyworm invasion for around 2 years. It has also reduced the crop yield by a considerable margin. The farmers meanwhile praised the presidents for looking in on them. Chief incumbent of the Mirisavatiya temple, Venerable Itala Vetunuwave ඥානතිලක Thera, was also present at the scene.
The Department of Meteorology has issued red alerts in 14 districts over heavy rains for tonight and tomorrow. Further, it also requests people to take necessary precautions to reduce casualties caused by strong winds and lightning during thunder showers.
The Department of Meteorology has issued red alerts for 14 districts over heavy rains due to the low-level atmospheric disturbances in the vicinity of Sri Lanka. Accordingly, showery conditions are expected to enhance over northern, eastern, north-central, central and northwestern provinces and in Badulla district during the next 24 hours.
Very heavy showers, above 150 millimeters, can be expected at some places in this area. Showers or thunder showers will occur at several places elsewhere, particularly in the night time. Fairly heavy showers, about 75 millimeters, can be expected at some places in these areas. Generally, the public is kindly requested to take advocate precaution of minimize the damages caused by temporarily localized strong wind and lightning during thunder showers.
Furthermore, heavy thunder showers, strong winds and rough seas are also expected in the east, northeast, north, northwest and western parts of the island.
Wind speed can increase up to 50 to 60 kilometers per hour at times over the sea area, extending from Colombo to Pothuil, Viva, Putlam, Trincomalee. The sea area can be rough at times. Temperately strong gusty winds, about 70 to 80 kilometers per hour, and rough sea can be expected during thunder showers.
Now, with Sri Lanka being downgraded by various rating agencies, including Fitch Ratings, we spoke to Head of Research at the International Credit Rating Agency to find out the rationale and the manner in which countries are rated. Lalinda Sukadadasa told us that a country is placed in the respective credit rating criteria based on how a country's macro fundamentals meet with the benchmarks of the credit rating agency. The government has been saying all along on each occasion when the country was subjected to negative rating action that measures taken through the budget 2021 had not been factored in the agency's decision-making.
In very simple terms, credit rating of a country is that country's ability and willingness to repay its foreign currency debt. Now, credit rating organizations look at multiple macro variables to assess the credit rating of a country. One of the most important indicators that they look at is debt to GDP. In addition to that, they may look at the budget deficit, current account deficit, and list goes on. Also, they look at the qualitative factors. Example, the corruption index. Now, they compare these variables against their benchmarks, and based on their models, they give a credit opinion. And this credit opinion is mapped to a scale. So at the top end, you have the AAA. At the bottom end, you have the CCC.
Head of Research at the International Credit Rating Agency, Lalinda Sukadadasa, says that the impact COVID-19 had on the country's ability to generate revenue, as well as the country's increased borrowings to settle current debts, negatively affect its rating status.
COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the entire globe. Its impact, especially on the trade and employment, is profound. Now, the countries with the weakest macro fundamentals are the most hurt from this pandemic. Now, that includes Sri Lanka. Also, we have to remember that in a crisis like this, the government revenue goes down, but the government expenditure does not. So you have inflated budget deficits, and these budget deficits also contributes to weakening of the macro fundamentals. In Sri Lanka, we pay 48% of our government revenue just for interest payments. That means we take more debt to pay our current debt, and this situation is called a vicious cycle, and that also negatively affects the rating of a country.
He also further elaborated on how Sri Lanka's import ban strategy might yield contradictory results in the long run.
Let's first try to understand why import restrictions were imposed. The idea behind import restrictions were to act as a backstop to depreciation. In the short run, this might work, but in the long run, this might create some problems. If you look at imports, it's also an input to domestic production and the export sectors. So these sectors might be affected. And secondly, when you put import restrictions, the trading partners might also take retaliatory actions. They can also put import restrictions from their side. So because of these reasons, import restriction, the efficacy of import restrictions is questionable in the long run.
As the final week of the year dawns at the Colombo Bourse tomorrow, dull sentiment which prevailed during last week is expected to remain. Sri Lankan stocks closed higher last Thursday, with the all-share price index gaining 0.85 points, or more like percent rather, to close at 6,685.64. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks meanwhile gained 0.97% to close at 2,599.67 last week. Now let's take a look at what we can expect at the market during the week ahead.
For the last week, we saw the market 3 days have a very dull sentiment and continue with upsurge in the Thursday session due to the long holiday. For the following week, what we expect, same side of scenario we might see, because the market is going to go on a month end and a year end, and we might not see the retail activities more because it's going to be a very long holiday for the market, and then people might see on a sideline. And for the turnover side, we might see a very dull sentiment, and foreign selling side, we might see a continuous foreign selling due to the rupee depreciation we witnessed in the last week. We might see some sort of foreign selling coming into the market to play in next week.
We'll see you shortly. Bear with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Japan says from tomorrow, the entry of non-Japanese nationals into the country will be suspended. The move comes after the country detected the new variant strain of the coronavirus identified in the United Kingdom. Many areas in the UK itself, meanwhile, have now entered Tier 4 restrictions. Many European countries also began mass inoculation programs today using the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
With many European countries beginning vaccine programs, health workers in Florence, Italy received their first doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine today as part of a national vaccination plan being implemented by the Health Ministry. The Health Ministry said that around 9,750 doses have already arrived in Italy, and another 470,000 are expected to arrive from next week. Similar to this, the first coronavirus vaccinations also began in Austria today. Vulnerable population groups will get the first COVID-19 shots, but frontline workers are expected to be a priority too. Like Austria, countries including France, Germany, Portugal and Spain are starting mass vaccination programs of unprecedented scale as parts of efforts to end a COVID-19 pandemic that has crippled economies and claimed more than 1.7 million lives around the world. In the meantime, more areas across England were placed under Tier 4 restrictions yesterday, following the pre-Christmas emergency measures announced by the UK government to curb the new variant of the coronavirus. The restrictions apply to areas in eastern and north-southern England where the new strain is more prevalent. Non-essential businesses have been closed starting from Boxing Day in areas including Sussex, Oxfordshire, Suffolk, Norfolk and Cambridgeshire. Meanwhile, Japan announced yesterday that it will suspend new entries of non-Japanese nationals from tomorrow through the end of January after detecting a new COVID-19 variant in arrivals from Britain. However, Japanese citizens and foreigners living in Japan will be allowed to return to the country. Japan's Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare said yesterday that more cases related to the new variant detected in Britain were reported in Tokyo, the first time the virus has been detected outside airports in Japan.
Now, a tigress in India's western Aurangabad city's Siddharth Garden and Zoo has given birth to 5 cubs. Zoo authorities said that Samruddhi and a yellow female at the zoo gave birth to the cubs after breeding with a yellow tiger Siddharth, and their condition is stable. Authorities have installed surveillance cameras to watch their movements and heaters to protect them from cold. The tiger population in India has risen to 2,967 in 2020 as per media reports. Conservation experts credit the increase to better management and policing of better habitats across the country. India was home to an estimated 40,000 tigers at the turn of the century, but poaching and the loss of habitat had brought them to the brink of extinction. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.